my name is Emiko and I am the Executive Director of Social Venture Partners Seattle.
Awesome. And my name is Paul Shoemaker. I was the first Executive Director and then Executive Director of SVP Seattle. And I've gotten the chance over the last couple of months here to get to know Emiko a lot better. She and I have talked a whole bunch of times, so it's just really cool to think a little bit about where we've came from, but think even way more about where we're going as an organization. So we become friends, and I assume we'll keep going from there, if it's okay with you.
I love that, and hopefully we'll do a lot more in person. Today, Paul,
cool.
Thank you for joining me to have a conversation about where we've been and where we're going and things we see in the world. But I might start out by just asking, how are you?
I'm good. I think like everybody, you have these parts of the day where you're doing great, and another part of the day when it sucks. And depending on the events that happen, you just you shut down, and other days you feel really productive. So I'm kind of all over the place. But hopeful that this country and this world and organizations like SVP can come through this craziness better on the other end than we went into it. Knock on wood.
Yeah, I agree. I'm feeling like that. It's amazing how many emotions you can have in one day.
In 1 hour.
It's new, right. And then in 10 minutes, I can feel really joyful and then very discouraged. Although one of my points of light is SVP Seattle and the work. I think, we tend to distract ourselves by throwing ourselves into our work, but this is a great organization. Something I've been thinking about a lot since we got to know each other is how we've changed. I know that, the organization, like the world, has had to respond to changes. And I'd love to know from your perspective, because you've been here since day one, how you think it's changed.
Oh, wow. What a good, big, rich question. I'd say a couple things, Emiko. One, we sort of started out with a relatively simple idea, which is to get people more engaged in the community, right? Actively involved, not just with their money, but with their time and their skills, and also more connected to each other as a network. So that was sort of the core founding idea. And I would say that through line still runs through it. But over the years, obviously, as we sort of got deeper into the community, we got deeper into issues, working with nonprofits, understanding their challenges, the community around us. I think we started to wake up and say, okay, we can't just think about how we're showing up, but what's the community we're showing up? How does it need to change? How do we need to change for that community? So we started to think about what's the change we want to create, right, in Greater Seattle. So I think we sort of went from, hey, how do we do more ourselves and accelerate our own philanthropy, to how do we help think more broadly about change around the community? And then in the last couple of years, and I think part of why you're there is, how do we really drive hard on this thing called equity and racial equity? And it took me a while to live into this, that eventually, I know from my perspective, long before I'd left, what I realized was almost everything we worked on, if you look deep enough down into the roots of it, that was there at the roots of it, right? That was part of it, whether it's education, environment, homelessness, whatever it is. Racial inequities, systemic inequities were right down there deep at the roots. So it takes you a while maybe to see it and find it, but now we know it, and the organization, I think, has woken up to that. So I think there's some through lines that are consistent, but I'm excited about the way it's evolving. It's thinking deeper, it's thinking harder. I think it's taking on bigger challenges and willing to take on bigger risks. So that's how I would say it's changed. So you're the new kid on the block. I can't think about what it's like starting a job coming into right now. Like, I want to ask you a bigger question, but like just small question. How has it been starting a job where, like, you can't go meet people? Like, the first day you start, it's all Zoom. What's that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's no playbook. So that's been interesting, where normally you'd say, like, well, these are the best practices. So there's good and bad things. I mean, the good news is that because I'm at home and I have no travel time, I can meet a ton of people. And I
Yep.
love that. Like the reason that I took this job was not only that I was excited about the mission and the direction the organization wanted to go, specifically around racial equity, but that this is an organization that's built on people and the relationships between people and connecting people. So that's great. You know, with that said, you know, am I developing the type of relationships I could? If you and I could go grab coffee, I could get on the bike, you know, maybe have a bike ride with Chris Rogers, or
Yep.
go join Carl Bradley at, you know, his brewery facility. You know, it's just, you know, so I can't help but think, would I have deeper relationships? But the good news is I get to have a lot more.
You
Um,
kind of get breadth, but you don't get as much depth, if you will, I guess,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
other thing about starting during this particular time is I have a sense, and I know the partnership has always been motivated, but I can feel it through my screen. There is, you know, there is an energy within the King County community, but specifically within our partners, to not just learn or to talk, but to act right now. And that is actually incredible. Like,
Yep.
I have to think like most of the problems, except for COVID-19, existed before March of 2020.
Yep.
Racial
So
inequity.
I was going to ask you, how do you feel like the events of the last 6 to 9 months have changed SDP Seattle? You're starting to answer that. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, so I always think about it in, you know, how we met this moment. You know, the first is that it's become crystal clear that the journey of racial equity that SCP Seattle has been on, really this has been priming us, and we were ready as an organization to act on this. Um, you know, this has been years in the making, and really, I have the gift of joining an organization that started their racial equity journey. So they were ready to have tough conversations, to talk about shifting power and money during this time. One of the other just, you know, things that I get to inherit right now is that people have more time. And so really there is just a ton of partners and community members that want to get together. And that's been a really good thing. You know, it's been exciting to have conversations on a weekly, you know, often daily basis with our partnership about how we can face the challenges ahead, because people are
Yep.
just more available and again ready to act. With that said, you know, I'm a pretty frank and transparent person, and Social Venture Partners, although we work in philanthropy, is a nonprofit, and we've
Yeah.
experienced the challenges that most nonprofits in the United States are facing. We had to shift, you know, office space because the Impact Hub, which housed many Seattle nonprofits,
Yep.
business. We've had to look, you know, many people have had to reevaluate their giving, and we've seen that in our budget. And those are just difficult realities that we're dealing with right now. So, you know, there are good things and bad things. I know that we're resilient. You know, that is definitely one thing that I think these last 6 to 9 months have shown us. Is SVP Seattle is a resilient organization. And even though this is a very challenging time, not just for us in the country, I know that we're going to get through it, and we're going to be stronger, and we will be part of and center at the rebuilding that will happen in 2021.
Amen. That makes total sense. It's interesting. When I was thinking about coming on the call with you, I reflected back on, we went through the dot bust in 2001, and we went through the Great Recession in 2009. And we absolutely, like you said, we were resilient. We survived those. Those were nothing compared to this. Don't get me wrong, right? But we did show that we could make it through those things. And I also went back and I looked through my files to find what was the first time I wrote a document, or someone wrote a document about diversity, equity, inclusion, racial equity, and it was in 2003.
Wow.
So, and obviously it goes way back before that, but as far as an organization's journey, we're in year 17 of it, and I hope you can take it new places and accelerate it faster than I did.
Oh, well, Paul, I think you and the other executive directors, you know, started that journey. And frankly, this is a journey that will never stop.
Yep.
So I'm really lucky and, you know, really excited to take on that next part of the story. What I'm really curious about is, I know you have in no way slowed down. since you left SVP Seattle, and you're still all over. And a lot of that is working with philanthropy and nonprofit organizations, not just in King County, but all over the country. And I'd love to know what other trends you're seeing that our partnership might be interested in learning about.
Absolutely. I'll do my best. So I'll sort of take it from the philanthropy side, then the nonprofit side, and those two things kind of bleed together. And it starts with it will always be the case that particularly philanthropy is this really, sort of by its nature, this sort of like hard to move big mass, right? So it's always going to be a hard sector to get moving. It doesn't have a sort of a market force or particular thing that's going to push it and make it move. Having said that, let's just take the last like 6 to 9 months. And I'll contrast it with what I just said a minute ago about 01 and 08. The way that philanthropy's reacted to the last 6 months, I think, is way more sort of exemplary and positive and motivating to me than it was how they, in 2001 and 2008-9, they kind of contracted, they kind of did some of this, right? Like they kind of like, and this time I see everybody lean in. So I think that's a positive trend in and of itself. And then if you look at a lot of the things that they're talking about that they want to be doing, and there's a couple pledges that were signed around this. They have committed to doing more longer term, less restricted funding. We've been barking about that for like 10, 15 years, right? So I do think, I've seen it kind of stick with people. There's a lot of conversations about we need to be, more responsive to, open with, honest with our grantees when this time of challenge. I've also seen a lot of talk about, and I'd say this has changed a lot, even before the last 6 months, the degree to which people want to bring the community's voice into this work. So I think we now know this isn't work you can do to someone. You have to do this with someone. That's not a complicated idea, but that philosophy, that's a real shift in how philanthropy thinks about the world. So those are sort of a handful of things that I've seen that I think evolved in the last handful of years, just like everything that have been accelerated in the last 6 months. And the sort of exclamation point on that to me is a lot of funders to say, we're going to do these things in these times in 2020 because of how it is. I just sort of want to scream and say, that's the way you should have been doing it, keep doing it that way. So hopefully one of the silver linings of this year will be that a lot of funders have changed their practices in response to this, and some of those practices will stick around. On the nonprofit side of it, Emiko, and I'll try to be shorter in the answer to this one, a couple things come to mind for me. One, I think racial equity, systemic equity now is front and center. And it was before, if you were in an organization, that's whose mission it was. But in other places, it was maybe sort of tangential or secondary, or, had to be careful when you say it. You don't have to be careful when you say it at all. Like that is what it is. That's what we're about. In any organization in this work, we're able to put racial equity at the center of whatever the cause and challenges we're working on. And I think that's a powerful shift in just sort of like how people think about this work and think about the sector. Second thing is, and this is undeniable, the next couple of years are going to be painful as hell. So I don't know if you call that a trend.
Yeah. But
I've heard people say as few as 10% and as many as 40% of nonprofits are going to close up shop. And it's going to be brutal, right? And so I hope the next trend I hope we see with some of these is they find a way to collaborate, get together, merge up, maybe for the wrong reasons, but they merge up and they sort of combine efforts out of survival sometimes, but maybe there's an opportunity and we see that, hey, we're both struggling, but we could do more together. So I think we're going to see contraction without a doubt, and then hopefully we'll see some sort of merging and bringing together in some of those cases. And the last one I would say is, and it kind of goes along with my first point, I think folks are they just keep digging deeper into root cause system change work. So there's lots of different ways you can approach this work, and everybody's work is important and it matters. And yet everybody, I think more folks think about system change and root causes of work than they did before. So that was a long-winded answer. I apologize. If you want to dig into any of that, you can tell me. But that's what comes to mind for me. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate with you?
I think that does. I mean, I can't help but think, where does SPP fit into these trends? I think what's so telling is we did, and really under your leadership, pioneered the multi-year unrestricted funding and developing partnerships. And we're really ahead of philanthropy. And so I think about as we move into 2021, how can we continue to push philanthropy? Because there is a huge willingness, like you said, that there never has been before with things in the philanthropic sector. So how can we be leaders in that? Because I believe our partners are really, they want to and are ready to do that. And at the same time, we are also that nonprofit that that's, like I said, struggling through some really challenging times. And so how do we really, how do we straddle both? I know that we can, and that's what's really hopeful. I've had many, many conversations with partners, and will continue to have many more. My goal is, my first 6 months to talk to every single partner. And then, I'm also talking to alumni and former staff and investees, and there is so much hope and energy.
Yeah.
Really what I think, for 2021, it's how do we stay true to our mission and our values, and yet at the same time, how do we meet the moment, both in leading in philanthropy in what we've always done, being a resilient organization, and having clarity and focus, like what's our stake in the ground? Because one of the things that you were saying about, looking at systems change and structural change is that I think, this is an opportunity for us to have even more clarity in our 2021 vision and beyond, and then have some tangible goals we can get behind. Which I'm really excited about. And there's a lot of work to get there. And we still have a fall that has more uncertainty than I've ever experienced in my 4 decades. But I know that we will be on the other side. This work.
You promise?
I promise. Although I have to admit, it's going to be a long fall. But what gives me hope is knowing that we're all still going to be here. This organization, and I said this at the beginning, you built an organization built on relationships and people. And none of the uncertainty or challenges of the world will break down those relationships. They're just stronger. And we're going to come out stronger because we are stronger together.
Something occurred to me as you were talking. When I was in the role, there was always this sort of yin yang between, it's a partnership, but there's also times where the director needs to lead, sort of lean forward, right? There's other times you sort of need to lean back and, back off. I'm just curious, like so far, have you figured out moments when, because you didn't show up as like a rookie with nothing on your resume like I did. You've got a pretty deep background, a pretty rich background in this work already. So have you figured out yet, like when do you sort of lean in, lean forward versus when do you kind of lean back and lead from behind? Have you figured out that back and forth yet?
Oh gosh, Paul, I think that is a constant journey. So have I figured it out? No. But what I do know, so, again, why I love this organization is the people. It also means people have a ton of different ideas and opinions, which I love. And I think, when to lead and when to step back is, my philosophy is to start any new job and any new initiative from a place of listening. And then to figure out, what am I hearing? I mean, because there are through lines and trends in everything that I'm hearing. As much as every one of our partners is unique and their own person, there's actually very common threads. So then, what I'm really, after I listen, is pulling those out and saying, as a leader, this is what I've heard from all of you. This is how really I am articulating the vision that you have all told me in a more concise way. And here is how we're going to get there. Putting how behind that vision. And that's really, my approach to leadership is my vision won't just be Emiko Atherson's vision. It's the collection and tapestry and quilt I put together from all these conversations, but to work with staff and to lead on the how. And it's a back and forth, it's about constant kind of, how are we doing? How is this reflecting our vision? And then really at the leadership level, figuring out the how we do that. And I see that's my role right now. That changes, my leadership style has evolved over the years. And I expect it to continue. I expect to continue to learn to evolve, but I think it really is a back and forth between how do I lift up a vision of all of us and then put a plan behind to actually make it happen. And then it might be stepping out again and letting the partners lead the how, like they're the implementers of the plan I've put together. And then it's a cycle. It goes back and forth.
Yeah. I just reflected on it. It's a yin and yang, just like you described it really well. And I would just, I'd encourage you, sometimes you got to lean in, you got to lean forward, right? And the whole group wants you to listen, and they also want someone to lead. And I've gotten to know you in the last couple of months, and I know full well you have the chops to do that. You got the background, you got the experience. And I think given where the organization is and all the things you and I have talked about and sort of where it wants to and needs to go, I think you're the right leader at the right time. So I hope you'll find that rhythm for yourself. And I'm fully confident in your ability to not only listen and lead from behind, but also to lean in and lead forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the year ahead plays out. It's going to be crazy, but it's full of opportunity.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Paul. And I'm so excited to have you as a partner in this story. And really, you're playing a different role than you did when it started, but you're still a main character.
Well, I remember what it was like when you were only been around as long as you were. So believe me, I'm here to not only be a partner and support you, but I'm behind your vision. Let's go.
Thanks so much, Paul. I think we're at time today, but again, just big thank you. I really want to try, if you could humor me in trying to do a vertical high five. I think I would go up and you would go down. 1, 2. All right, we'll try better next time. But thank you, Paul, and thank you to everyone who's listening. Let's go 2021.
Thanks, Emiko.
Thanks, Paul. Bye-bye.
Bye.